طيب بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open up our hearts to that which is good and beneficial, and to close our hearts to that which is ugly and displeasing to Him. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to elevate our collective state, to make this community a community that is truly in the footsteps of our beloved Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. We ask Allah to forgive us and to forgive our shortcomings, and to have mercy upon us and upon our parents, and to be pleased with us ila yawm ad-din, until the day when we stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we ask Him to grant us the highest levels of Jannah in the afterlife. Allahumma ameen ya rabbil alameen. So inshallah, continuing from this afternoon's khutbah, how many of you, just a quick show of hands, how many of you heard the khutbah this afternoon? Okay, so a good percentage, maybe 50%. I want to make just a very quick disclaimer before I continue. I know the issue of parent-child relationships is a complex issue. It's a complex issue that has many facets to it. And I know everyone has their own personal story, their own personal opinion, their own personal feelings, and their own personal challenges. And I hope and pray that I'm able to address them holistically, at least at a high level, in the khutab and in the talks, during Q&A, etc. But know that it's not beyond me that people are going through very specific, difficult circumstances. And what we're trying to do in the masjid is really set a principled standard for the type of community we want. And at the heart and soul of this really must be how we think about our ideals and our principles. And for us, the way in which we honor our parents and respect our elders is a part and parcel of our ideals and our principles. And I have to say that unfortunately the standard is, in society as well as increasingly in the Muslim community, that the awe and the reverence that was had for elders and for parents, that was really a defining principle, is increasingly becoming not the case. And many children, regardless of their age, because as I said multiple times, we're all children, find it very okay for themselves to be aggressive, insulting, disrespectful, neglectful of their parents. It truly is a problem. I would even call it an epidemic. And so what we're trying to do is set principle standards. Of course, there are always exceptions, there are always problems, there are always issues, and we try to encompass them. But come to me, whatever problems or challenges you face, come and talk to me personally in my office. We go through a lot of challenges, I understand. But I hope and pray that what we're able to do is really inculcate in our community a true prophetic spirit. Because as I illustrated in the khutbah today, the issue of respecting and revering your parents, it's not just a good thing to do or a nice thing that people can do. This is a matter of theology and spirituality. It really is. In our religion, parents, they hold a very sacred space. And this is not me talking. This is the many sightings that I made in the khutbah, and a few more that I'll emphasize today. But we really have to come to terms with this. Even if I'm in a very difficult situation with my own parent, if I'm dealing with an abusive parent, we have to deal and address that, right? But that doesn't take away from what parents mean in our lives, because there is a profound spiritual dimension that is attached to parents. And so I hope and pray that we're able to understand this and really begin to internalize and live accordingly. Even if you think of this parents, the title, Our Door to Jannah, where does Our Door to Jannah come from? One time a man came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, Ya Rasulullah, Uridul Ghazw, I want to go out and be with you. in your expeditions. Struggling in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, striving in that way was one of the greatest forms of ibadah. Bar none during that time. The first question the Prophet ﷺ asked him was, Alaka do you have a mother? He said, yes. He said, Idhab fa innal jannata tahta qadamayha. Go to her, for verily heaven is beneath her feet. He preferred that this companion stays home with his mother to serve her and take care of her, rather than to come out with him in ghazwa. That's a very big deal. The fact that the Prophet ﷺ would take that stance. In a different circumstance, a man came to the Prophet ﷺ, he said, I want to do ghazwa with you. And he said, do you have parents? He said, yes. He said, what's your state with them? He said that when I left them, they were crying because I was leaving. He said, Irja' ilayhim. Go back to them and bring a smile to their face, kama abkaytahuma. Just as you made them cry, go back and put a smile on their face by staying with them. This is the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ. So this is no light matter. A story that I think beautifully illustrates how profound birrul walidain is, being respectful and honoring of your parents is the famous story of Ouais al-Carne. For those of you who know this story, it's a beautiful story. The Prophet ﷺ was sitting with the companions, and he says that one day you will meet a man by the name of Ouais al-Carne, and he will be a person who's very poor. وَعِنْدَهُ الْبَرَص, and he has a type of leprosy, and all of his leprosy will be healed, except that what will remain is one patch of whiteness on his arm. لَوْ أَقْسَمَ عَلَى اللَّهِ لَأَبَرَّهُ. If he swears upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will listen to him. لَوْ أَقْسَمَ عَلَى اللَّهِ لَأَبَرَّهُ. He was poor, very simple. He was actually a slave at one point from Yemen. He was not known, مجهول في الأرض. He was unknown in the earth. معروف في السماء. That was his description. Unknown in the earth, but he was known in the skies. If he swears upon Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will listen to him. The Prophet ﷺ says he will make shafa'ah for entire peoples in the afterlife. That his intercession will bring scores of people into Jannah. Do you know what the most distinct quality of this person was? Birrul walidain, his respect for his parents. You know why? Uwais al-Qarni was alive during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And he came into Islam through Ali ibn Abi Talib. And he had the chance to go meet the Prophet ﷺ, to leave where he was in Yemen and to go towards the Prophet in Medina. But he never went. And the only reason he never went was because he had a mother and she needed to be taken care of. And he said, if there's anyone who would understand, it is the Prophet ﷺ. So although he was alive during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, he never met him. So he's not a companion. He's not a sahabi. He's a tabi'i. He is from the greatest of the tabi'een. The tabi'een are those who come after the companions. He was known as one of the great zuhad of the tabi'een. And so that tells you something about this man's standing. So the Prophet ﷺ, he told the companions who were there, Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Sayyidina Umar, he said, look for this man as the wufud come from Yemen. As all of the people come from Yemen for Hajj, look for this man. وَإِن لَقِيتُمُوهُ, and if you find him, فَاسْأَلْهُ أَنْ يَسْتَغْفِرَ لَكُمْ. Ask him to make dua for you, to ask for forgiveness for you, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive you. Now this is Umar. Sayyidina Umar, Sayyidina Abu Bakr. The Prophet ﷺ is saying, look for this man, and when you find him, ask him to make dua for you for forgiveness, because you will be forgiven. And the sole reason was what? Was his loyalty and his respect and his care for his mother. Also because he was a person who desired nothing from this dunya. So as the years progress, the Prophet ﷺ dies. Sayyidina Abu Bakr becomes the Khalifa and he dies. Sayyidina Umar becomes the Khalifa. Every single year during the Hajj season, he would go down to the Kaaba. He would look for the people of Yemen. He would ask for the people from Murad. That was the tribe that he was from. He would say, Afikum Uwais. Is there someone here, Uwais? They would say, no. Is there someone here from the family of Carne, which was the family of Uwais? One person raised his hand. He said, that's my cousin, but he didn't come with us on this Hajj. So Sayyidina Umar asked him, why not? How come he didn't come with you? He asked him, Sayyidina Umar asked Uwais' cousin, is his mother still alive? He said, yes. He said, Sadaqa Rasulullah. I know why he didn't come, because he's busy taking care of his mother. A year and 2 years after that, every year Sayyidina Umar, as the Khalifa, the most powerful man on earth at that time, arguably, is there every year asking about Uwais al-Qarni. Until one year, as he's searching the same thing, tribal from Yemen, looking for the people from Yemen, people from Murad, etc., he finally meets Uwais al-Qarni. And he says to him, can I see your shoulder? So Umar radiallahu anh sees, and he sees the white patch that the Prophet ﷺ described many, many years earlier. And he said to him, let me guess, did your mother die? He said, yes, my mother has passed this year. And so he said, please, I ask of you to make dua that Allah forgives my sins. And imagine, Uwais al-Qarni has no idea what's happening. He doesn't know what Umar radiallahu anh knows. He doesn't know that the Prophet has spoken volumes about him many years earlier, that this is a man who is from Ahlul Jannah, this is a man who will intercede for scores of people, this is a person whose dua is accepted, this is a person, لَوْ أَقْسَمَ عَلَى اللَّهِ لَأَبَرَّهُ. All of the virtues of Uwais, he has no idea that he holds any of these virtues. So Umar radiallahu anh begins to tell him, this is what the Prophet ﷺ has said about you. And so he keeps on going and telling him. And so Sayyidina Umar wants to take him and basically bring him back to Medina and really take care of him and give him the honor that he deserves. This is Uwais al-Qarni, the one of Shaykh. And he swore upon Umar radiallahu anh. He said, don't tell anyone about me. I don't want anyone to know about me. I don't want to be of standing. I want to remain majhulun fil ard. I want to remain an unknown person on earth. And so Sayyidina Umar was just beyond himself. I want to take you back to Medina so I can honor you and take care of you. And Uwais is saying, absolutely not. So Sayyidina Umar says, then at least let me give you money and let me have people financially take care of you, because you are to be taken care of. He said, I do not desire one penny. I have everything that I need. The Prophet ﷺ, what he said is more than sufficient for me. Imagine hearing all of that about yourself, and what that increases in you is your modesty. And he insists to remain as an unknown. And he dies a few years later after the caliphate of Sayyidina Umar, during the khilafah of Sayyidina Uthman. Brothers and sisters, the sole reason, beyond the fact that he was zahidun fid dunya, what really set him apart was the fact that he preferred serving his mother over everything, even meeting the Prophet ﷺ. And the fact that he received that standing tells you how virtuous this status is in our religion. And so when we talk about respecting and honoring your parents, this is a spiritual state that you should be in. And I want all of us as children, because each and every single one of us, we are children. All of us should internalize this as a spiritual reality. That I am someone who, regardless of what my parents are, but in my heart, because of the fact that Allah and His Messenger command me to have respect, I will have respect, even if it's difficult for me. Set aside the challenges, and we'll get to that in a moment, because I know there are a lot of distinct challenges in that regard. But I want us to just pause at this spiritual level, because we have to change our discourse about respecting our parents. This is not something that is a luxury, that I may choose at one point to tolerate my parents. If I'm not in this state the way that Uwais was, and the way all of the companions were, those who lived with the Prophet ﷺ. Think a few generations later, the likes of Imam Abu Hanifa. Listen to this story. When I read it, I said, Subhanallah, look at these people. Imam Abu Hanifa, he had a mother. Now, Imam Abu Hanifa was the scholar of scholars, right? Bar none. He was the scholar of scholars. Everyone knew that. His mother, however, preferred a wa'id in the masjid. There was a person who would give wa'id, just reminders and nice reminders in the masjid. Was not a scholar. But the mother of Abu Hanifa preferred him. His name was Umar ibn Muzaffar. Preferred him over Abu Hanifa. Imagine that. She preferred this wa'id in the masjid over her own son. And she would say, carry me, take me to Umar's gathering, because I want to sit and listen from him, and I have questions for him. So she would force Abu Hanifa, who was the top scholar in the world at his time, she would force him to take him to Umar's majlis, Umar ibn Mudaffar's majlis. And she would sit there. And then she would call her son, Abu Hanifa, come here. Go ask him this question. So Abu Hanifa, with all humility and obeying his mother's orders, would go to Umar, this wa'id in the masjid, and say, my mother has sent me to ask you a question. And so Umar says to him, Umar ibn Mudaffar says to him, Abu Hanifa, you are our scholar and our teacher's teacher. I don't even know the answer. You're the one who knows the answer. So he said to him, okay, I will tell you the answer. All right, I'll whisper it to you, and then you say it to me in a loud voice, so that everyone hears that the answer is coming from you. So Abu Hanifa does that. He tells him the answer softly. Then Umar repeats it. He said, this is the answer. And then he goes back and he said, did you hear the answer? He said, that's a great answer. The mother of Abu Hanifa. He's a true scholar. And when sometimes Abu Hanifa would think of giving his own opinion to her, she'd say to him, I don't like your opinion, I want to hear Umar's opinion. And this wa'id in the masjid was lower than the student's level of Abu Hanifa. But did Abu Hanifa ever think of saying a word other than, I hear and I obey? Okay, no problem. He would actually do hiyal, these types of going around the corner to just make sure that his mother was satisfied, that she got her answer from the Shaykh that she liked, and it wasn't her own son. So that spirit is what governed their behavior. And I find the story of Imam Abu Hanifa so important, because we all know him as this scholar of scholars, one of the first of the four madhahib, founder of, at the helm of a school of fiqh that is followed by millions of people until today. The Ahnaf span the entire subcontinent, entire regions, continents, all of the Ottoman Turks, all Ahnaf, attributed to Imam Abu Hanifa. And this is how he was with his mother. Never for a moment making her thinking otherwise. That's the spirit. And that's the spirit that I want us to really resolve now within ourselves, that we take that further. So Imam Abu Hamid, he has very beautiful advice in terms of how we should honor our parents and how we should respect our parents. Imam al-Ghazali, so Imam Abu Hurairah first, He says, what are some of the adab that should be had with the parents? First off, these are the physical adab. Always, if your father or your mother is walking, you walk behind them unless they give you permission to do otherwise. Right? And in the night, sometimes the laws may change based on the threats of that time. So the standard is if your father or your mother is walking ahead of you, you walk behind them with respect. But if there is perhaps a danger, then you may shift in front of them. I'm saying this just to show you what the spirit of these adab actually looked like. Don't ever call your parent by their name. You only call them by what they ask you to call them. Whether it's mother, father, mama, baba, ummi, abi, ammi, abu, mom, dad, so-and-so, abu so-and-so, al-hajj so-and-so. What they ask you to call them by, that's what you call them by. You never call your parent by their first name. وَلَا تَجْلِسْ قَبْلَهُ. This is the advice of Abu Hurairah, the famous narrator of hadith. Don't sit before your parents sit. You make sure that your parents sit first, then you sit. You never sit before them. You make sure that they choose the seat that is comfortable for them, then you sit. وَلَا تَمْشِي أَمَامَهُ. You don't walk ahead of them quickly, rushing. If your parents are walking slowly, you walk by their side, holding their arm politely, seeing they may need something from you. They may request of you that you do something for them, to fetch something for them. No matter how old, how young, how wealthy, how distinguished you are, that's the hay'ah that you take. Immediately with your parents, you lower, like we said in the khutbah, the wings. Lowering the wings is lowering your power. You know, and I gave the example in the khutbah today of, I actually made a mistake in the name in the khutbah. It was Ali Zainul Abidin was the one who would not touch the plate of food until his parents ate first, especially his mother. He would say, I don't want to touch any morsel of food, fearing that my mother's heart was attached to a piece of food on the plate. So he would wait and act as if he's eating until she ate. But of course, mothers, what do they care about? That their children eat the nicest thing. And the mother will hesitate. And whenever the mother will get her food, she'll say, do you want my food? Do you want to try my food? Do you want some of my food? Right? So look at the spirit that they were able to internalize. Muhammad ibn al-Munkadir, because of his fear that he may have ever insulted his mother, he would ask her, he would put his head on the floor and say, Mom, please step on my head. So that just in case I ever insulted you, please forgive me. That's why I said in the khutbah, and I'll say it again and I'll say it 20,000 times, we are people who kiss our parents' hands. Kiss your parent, even if you were never accustomed to it. Even if your parents themselves are uncomfortable with it, teach your parents that their hands are to be kissed. Shatra. She's learning on the spot. May Allah increase you and bless your daughter. Kiss. This is a beautiful spirit. You know, and wallahi, it would warm my heart to see my teachers who are all gray, just through and through, and their fathers who are in their 80s and 90s. My shuyukh, who when I sit with them, I have such haiba for them, such regard for them. When they would see their father, they would see their mother, they would bend down and kiss the hand. And I've seen some of my own teachers kiss their mother's feet with my own eyes, out of respect and reverence for their parents. Right? So these are just some of the standards that I want us to begin to think about in our relationships with our parents. Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, he gives us some basic adab, and then I'm going to transition to the next very important point. He says that you always listen to what your parents are saying. Regardless of what they're saying, you listen to it. Sometimes, as we said in the khutbah, you may not obey it because it's haram, or it's wrong, or it's going to lead to some evil. You may say, I can't obey it, but you listen to it. And listening is a respectful act. You sit there with humility and respectfulness and you listen to what your parents are saying. If they're calling to haram or they're calling to wrong, you don't obey, but you don't obey with tremendous adab. And this is why in some of the madhahib, that if you're praying your nafila prayer, your sunnah prayer, and your parents call you, your mother calls you while you're in your nafila prayer, many of the madhahib say that you can break your prayer to answer her call. You can break your sunnah so that your mother doesn't sit there waiting to see, where is my son? Where is my daughter? Why aren't they answering me? You can break your sunnah to answer your parents. How about if our parents are calling us night and day just to hear our voice and we ignore their phone calls? We let their phone calls go to voicemail. We ignore their text messages. We don't look at their WhatsApp because we don't want them to see that we checked, the double check is there, right? We don't want them because we just don't want to deal with it. Maybe on the weekend I'll call them. Maybe I'll visit them at some time. That type of selfish, self-centered, thoughtless behavior is far removed from our tradition. When your parents, when they call upon you, your heart should flutter. Your heart should flutter. You should think twice and 3 times about when your parent calls you, what that means. I shared in the khutbah my close friend who had an abusive mother, an extremely abusive mother. Go back and listen to it. I'm not going to rehash the whole story. But after she died, all he wanted was another opportunity to have his mother call upon him, although she was miserably abusive to him, because periodically she would make a simple dua for him, and that's all he wanted once again. I shared with all of you one of my own my own cousin who passed away last year, that when his mother was in her 90s, he would sit there and he would, carry her on his back so that she could go to the bathroom, because she couldn't walk anymore and she couldn't take care of herself in the bathroom anymore. So he would carry her to the bathroom. He would wash her up. He would take care of her back and forth. And I would go visit them. And he would say to me, he said, what's astonishing to me? That people thank me for how I treat my mother. And I am so offended by that. I said, why are you offended? He said, why are they thanking me? This is my obligation. If I didn't do this, I'd be an ingrate. I'd be a deadbeat. I'd be a loser if I didn't do this. Me caring for my mother this way is my obligation in front of Allah, and anything less would be a criminal in His sight. And this was a man who was an extremely simple person. He wasn't a scholar or a Shaykh in Islam or anything along those lines. He was your average Muhammad. But he understood something about the religion that was so profound. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. We said in the khutbah that the standard for how you treat your parents is excellence and beauty. That is the standard. There's no other option. You can't treat them in a mediocre way. That's not actually a choice. You don't have that choice. You can't say, fine, I'll deal with her later. You're sitting with your friends, oh my God, it's my mom again. Oh, it's my dad again. I'm sick and tired of it. They're so annoying. They're so judgmental. They're going to ask me where I am. I don't want to tell them where I am. I'm out with my friends. What do they care? All of that is extremely dangerous language to be uttered on our tongues. And unfortunately, we have our young people who are in their teenage years, in their high school years, in their college years speaking this way, and we have people who are in their 30s and 40s and 50s who speak the same exact way. And as I said, your parents are not a problem that you can throw money at. A lot of people, they think that they can deal with their parents by putting them in a nursing home. Allah says, وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. You have an obligation to them directly. There's no intermediaries. That's why the ba is لِلْمُلَاسَقَةِ, is to indicate that there is closeness. You always have to be the one taking care of their needs. And actually, quite the contrary. If someone tries to get in between you and your parents, you say absolutely not. If there is a caretaker who's the one that you're paying, you say, I'm the one who's going to do it. Unless it's completely out of your scope and your capability, and your parents have a very particular need, then you can be there and observe the help. But never for you to be someone that your parents are literally rotting away in nursing homes. I know of parents, Wallahi al-Azim, I heard this story from a Shaykh. that a parent was in a nursing home, a Muslim parent was in a nursing home and died. And when they went to tell the kids, your parent has died, you know what they asked? He's still alive? That was their question. And I could only think, what is their state with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That not only did they neglect, they didn't even care. I mean, how dark can a person have become if that is their state? That they don't even care. He's still alive? Oh, we were hoping he'd die years ago. That has nothing to do with Islam. And even if that person was bad or abusive, that's not the spirit that we carry. Yeah, we may have to deal with the abuse. We may have to seek out the necessary help. We may need the shuyukh to get involved to intercede with some of the abuse. And I know of abuse that happens from parents towards their children. I'm dealing with cases right now. But never should it be the case that our hearts or our souls arrive at a point that we disregard our parents, because then we have a spiritual problem with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's just a sprinkling of what is due from us towards our parents. Imam Abu Hamid says many things about how our parents should be respected, but I want to leave it at that because I want to transition into the second part of this conversation. And that is for our parents to understand that just as our parents are due tremendous rights, and if there's anything that I emphasize between the khutbah and until now, is that our parents are due their rights. Our parents too need to understand that there are rights that are due to children. Children are due their own set of rights. And the respect, and I want to make this very clear, the respect and the reverence that is gifted to parents by Allah is not a license to abuse. We must never threaten our children and be abusive towards them and just transform them into servants and slaves under the guise of religious guidance. That is not acceptable. Allah does not like oppression. Remember my khutbah from last week, abuse in the home. Allah hates oppression. And if any of our parents think that they can be in a position to oppress their children, then there's a big problem. If they're going to threaten their children under the guise of religion, just because they want their children to follow their own whims, that is wrong. And so just as our parents are due tremendous reverence, I want my beloved parents to understand that that's not code that I do whatever I want whenever I want. There are standards that must be upheld. A man came to Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, and he said to him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, my son is a'aq. My son is not respectful of me. And so he said to him, okay, bring your son to me. So Sayyidina Umar sat with the son. And the first thing that the son said to the father, the son said to Sayyidina Umar, he said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, you know, I know that my parents are due their right and they are to be respected, but do children have their rights? So Umar radiallahu anhu said, of course. So he said, what are my rights? He said, your first right is that your parent chooses a righteous spouse for you. That before you're even born, subhanallah, before your children are born, they have a right upon them already for them, which is you choose a righteous spouse. That's why all of us, we have to be very choice in the spouse that we choose, because it is our children's right. Talk about children's rights. Tell me in any international code or charter of rights for children where it exists the choice of spouse. That's in our tradition. It happens before our kids are even born, that they're due rights. Because what does that entail? That entails I marry a person who fears Allah. I marry a person who has good character. I marry a person who has taqwa. I marry a person who wants to be pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I marry a person who's going to be a support system, who's going to fulfill their role كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. All of you are shepherds and all of you are responsible for your flock. Al-ab ra'i wal-ummu ra'iyah. That the father is a shepherd and the mother is a shepherd. That both understand that there is a due responsibility in that space. And so everyone is thinking about their kids as they're choosing their spouse. Choosing your spouse is not just about you. It's about the future of Islam. It's about the future of this ummah. Because we want an ummah that's built upon La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah. We want a generation of people who their sole purpose in existence is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not to please myself, not to please my own shahawat and my desires, but to attain Allah's pleasure. The second right that Umar tells the son is very interesting. He says that they choose for you a good name. And so the son smiles and he says, my father has chosen for me an ugly name, a name that indicates war. That's what my parent has chose for me. And so he said, my mother, she's not a righteous woman. She's an abusive person who does not care about Allah. My name is an ugly name. And then the third right was, he said, that the child learns the Quran. That the parent teaches basically Islam to the child. And so the child said to Sayyidina Umar, my father has never taught me one word of the Quran. Not one. And so he grabbed the father and he said, you're looking for something and you have given your child none of his rights. Now, of course, that is not a license ever for the child to disrespect the parent, but that is for the parent to understand that you have responsibilities, that on the Day of Judgment you will be asked about your children. We don't have children just so that we can show off to our relatives. We don't have children just so that we can put on nice little booties on their feet and put on baby Gap and Oshkosh. That's not why we have children, so we can show off our kids and say, look how cute my kids are, and have endless Facebook streams of child's photos picking apples. That's not why we have kids. That may be a nice thing you do on the weekend, but you have kids so that you can attain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you understand that about having your children, then you will do everything in your power to ensure that how you treat your children is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you understand why you had a child in the first place, then you will ensure that nothing you do is displeasing to Allah. So when you prevent your child from marrying someone that is righteous, just because of superficial factors, ones that are just about your own whims and desires, and this person, brother or sister, is a righteous Muslim that has good character, and we already have a marriage crisis in our community. When you allow yourself, just because of your own selfish inclinations, that doesn't mean that there's no room for us to marry our children to who we want them to marry to. If that is if that's an easy and accessible way of getting married. But when you live in the US and we have a tremendous marriage crisis where so many of our sisters are not getting married, so many of our brothers are not getting married, and our parents are one of the biggest impediments for superficial reasons, and they're neglecting to embrace Muslims who have good akhlaq and good character, then the Prophet said, then you are going to sow corruption on this earth with your own hands. So when I don't look out for my child's best interest, and my child's best interest is a righteous spouse, then I'm not fulfilling my duties towards my kids. See, that's a part of the process. Like I said, the respect that we spoke about between the khutbah and today is never a license to just follow my whims and my desires. Yes, sometimes the child may sacrifice something they like because they say, you know what, I prefer what my parent likes. Because my parent, what they're asking for is a good thing. It may be different from what I want, but it's a good thing. I may sacrifice for that because it makes them happy. That's a possibility. And by the way, all of this is within context. And so if you have particular cases, come and talk to me about them. But abuse is never okay. Oppression is never okay. Strong-arming and turning your child into a slave is never okay. That's never okay. And so your rights upon the rights that your children are due is that you teach them this religion. You teach them everything that is required to make sure that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with them. You know, because if you don't do that, if you don't teach your children the right values, they're going to grow up and they're going to be themselves abusive parents. Because just as we are to our children, that's how they'll be. And when they grow up and they have the capacity, the financial capacity, they'll just drop their parents. And they'll say, I'm sick and tired of my parents. Now for that child, that's a very devastating place to be in. But for that parent, you have to understand that many times we create our own realities by our own conduct and behavior. Go back to last week's khutbah and halaqa and see how the Prophet ﷺ dealt with his daughters. When he dealt with Fatima the way he did, he kissed her and he loved her and he made her feel cared for. You know, a lot of us, we complain about our daughters running off with boys and going out places. And much of the time, the reason why our daughters do that is because they don't feel love in the home. You know, Dr. Sherman Jackson, I'll never forget him when he taught me this. He said, every single Muslim man, father, brother, needs to understand that they better love the females in their lives. They better shower them with love, because if they don't show them love, they're going to seek love elsewhere. And so if all I get from my father, if a daughter, all she sees from her mother or father is an ugly, angry face, a face that is just disregarding, that your duty is to be quiet and submissive and never talk, never hugged or kissed or cared for, a brother who treats her with even more oppressive qualities, who doesn't even have the right to do that, but just follows suit, then what do we expect from our community? If we're not following the footsteps of the Prophet ﷺ, what do we expect from our children? And so a discussion about reverence of parents and rights and responsibilities is never going to be code word for me for abuse. It's always going to be, how do we find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure? And each and every single one of us, whether we're a child or a parent, our primary responsibility is to ask that question. The way I deal with my parent, is it pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The way I deal with my child, is it pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or not? That's your primary question to ask. Because I know that sometimes children are in very abusive situations. I know people who they have faced the worst forms of trauma in the home, sexual abuse and otherwise in the home. I know of this firsthand. And that I will never tell that person that your duty is to stay silent and take the abuse. That's not the message about revering and respecting your parent. That yes, you have to seek help. There has to be people who are getting involved, people of authority who come in and they fix that problem. That child will need counseling and psychological help and mental health professionals who can help them. But that for that child, I will always say that regardless, in your heart, in your spiritual heart, maintain, for the sake of Allah, a sense of respect for your parents. Deal with all of the psychological trauma. Go out and seek help. Include people who can help you figure out your problems so that we can put an end to the abuse. And I said multiple times, we have no tolerance for abuse in this masjid. And if you're being abused or if you are an abuser, come and talk to us. But regardless, that sense of reverence is an ideal. So that when I meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I can say, Ya Allah, I dealt with the hardship that you asked me to deal with. And I sought out the necessary help. But not once did I allow myself to disrespect my parent. I never yelled at them, I cursed at them. Yeah, I may have said, I can't even be in your presence because you will physically violate me. Ya Allah, I had to physically remove myself from that space based on the guidance of my teachers and mental health counselors and so on. But never once did I allow myself to yell. Because you said in the Quran, وَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ. You said, وَلَا تَنْهَرْهُمَا. So I didn't. But out of respect for, out of love and regard for you, Ya Allah. That's the type of nuance that I want us to begin to think about. That yes, we have complex scenarios. Yes, we have children that are so hard to deal with, who disobey us, who run away from us, who know, regardless, they don't show us the respect that we want of them, that we love for them. But that's never code word to be abusive, or to be aggressive, or to enslave them, or to prevent them from coming to the masjid, prevent them from going to, majalis of ilm, just because of a selfish reason. So many a times we prevent our children from khair, from goodness, just for ourselves, just because our whims and desires tell us that that should be the case. So brothers and sisters, I'm gonna open the floor for Q&A, but I hope that I sufficiently, number one, problematized this issue. By problematizing, I mean the indication that reverence for our parents is a standard ideal that we must once again return to and celebrate. That there are rights that are due to our parents, emotional rights, psychological rights, physical rights, financial rights that are due to our parents. And so too there are rights from parents towards their children. And all of these rights are governed by one thing, the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so if you're dealing with a complex circumstance with your child, or a complex circumstance with your parent, come and talk to me.